This week's Torah portion is somewhat of a continuation of last week's Torah portion, yet with a different spin. Last week, we learned about the commandment for the construction of the Mishkan, the portable tabernacle that the Jewish people would use during their wandering in the desert. And even though it happened, and we read about it in last week's Torah portion, we know that it really took place. All of the commandments and all of the construction of the tabernacle happens after the sin of the golden calf as an atonement for the sin that was committed. This week's Torah portion is also a continuation. It's not really speaking about the construction, the fabrication of the Mishkan. Rather, it's speaking about the fabrication and putting together the garments that the Kohen Gadol, the great priest, as well as the other Kohanim, will all don during their service in the Mishkan and eventually one day in the Bet HaMikdash, in the temple. So that's this week's Torah portion. So I say a continuation, it's similarly a continuation. Yet last week was all of the structure and all of the furniture items in their holiness, and this week is the garments that the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol would be wearing. It's very important for us to understand Moshe Rabbeinu's role, as well as what his role was supposed to be, the way God intended for it to be. God's intention was that Moshe should not only be the prophet, the Navi, he was also the Melech, the king. He was the ruler, the leader. He was also the spokesperson. He's the one who came to Paro, and he spoke on behalf of God to the Jewish people. And he was also intended to be the priest, the Kohen Gadol. However, the Talmud tells us that this amazing gift of the Kohen, of being the Kohen, of the Kehuna, the priesthood, was taken away from him. Now, why would it be taken away from him? Well, as great as Moshe was, the greatest man that ever walked the face of this earth, he still was not perfect, and God judged him more stringently, to the point where the first time God appears to Moshe Rabbeinu, he appears to him where? In the burning bush. And he tells him, I'm choosing you to become the leader of the Jewish people. I want you to go and redeem them. I want you to deliver them out of bondage, taken out from Egypt and all of that slavery. So Moshe's answer was, me? I think, with all due respect, God, you've made a mistake. It shouldn't be me. Rather, I think you mean someone else. The terminology the Torah uses, this is in chapter 4, verse 13 in Shemot. It says, Vayomer bi Hashem. Hashem, you talking to me? Am I the one? No. Shelachna biyad tishlach. Find someone else. Find someone more worthy. Again, it was stemming from his humility, but Moshe is saying, find someone that is more worthy to carry out this task. I don't think it is really for me. The Talmud in Masechet Zevachim says, because Moshe Rabbeinu refuses God's request to act as the messenger, he was then taken away the blessing of priesthood. Now, as severe as it is for the blessing or for the position of priesthood to be taken away from Moshe, it also means it was taken away from his descendants. That means it was not now going to be Moshe's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren all the way down that were going to be Kohanim. That was taken away. The Zera Shimshon is puzzled and asks, that's a very severe punishment for refusing. Now, I know refusing God is not an easy thing. It's not a light thing. It's like refusing one's spouse. It's not a light thing. It's not a good thing. But God, it's a very severe thing. Yet on the other hand, at the end of the day, Moshe did it. At the end of the day, Moshe did come and act as the messenger for the Jewish people to take them out. So why did God have such a severe punishment to him that he was now not going to be the Kohen, neither his descendants? Listen to the answer the Zera Shimshon He says, what is the role of a Kohen? If there are any Kohanim listening, tuning in, or present, listen to how powerful this concept is. The role of a Kohen is to do and to carry out the service in the temple. Imagine all the Jews, Kohanim, Leviim, Israelim, everyone would come along and everyone would be doing all of the service in the temple. There'd be no room to move. Nothing would ever get done. So God selected the chosen few and said it was the Kohanim which were going to be the ones who carry out this service. Which means that the Kohanim act as messengers on behalf of the Jewish people. Do you know that in the time of the temple, time of the Bet HaMikdash, when sacrifices were being brought, the Jewish people, that would mean us, would not have Sidurim, we would not pray Amidah, the silent prayer, we would not have Shacharit, Mincha, and Arvit the way we have it. It was the Kohanim's service and their sacrifices which they brought in the temple, on the Mizbeach, on the altar, which were the main source and the main form of prayer and connection between God and the Jewish people. Rather, the Jewish people to God. When that was no longer, when the temple was destroyed, the sacrifices were replaced by prayer. So what it means is that the Kohanim acted for always as messengers for the Jewish people. So now look at the Zera Shimshon's beautiful answer. He says, yes, it's a severe punishment, very severe punishment, that God is now taking away the priesthood from Moshe. But he says, what was Moshe refusing from? He was refusing from becoming the messenger for the Jewish people, the shaliach. You refused then, God says, unfortunately you're going to have to refuse it forever. You will not be the Kohen. Your family will not be Kohanim. It will not be passed on to you. Since you refused the position of being a messenger in that capacity, you won't be able to, and your family won't be able to act as the messengers, as Kohanim, in that capacity forevermore. So as severe as it is, it still follows, as the Zera Shimshon says, under the rule of measure for measure. Midah, keneged midah. The way God always acts is very exact. The way a person is treated, they are deserved that way by the Almighty, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With that introduction, it's important that we note that even though Moshe Rabbeinu, the priesthood was taken away from him, nevertheless, he still worked. And I say work because it was work. He worked 100% devoted and wholeheartedly for the Jewish people and for God. He was, as we know it best, a complete civil servant. He was a servant of God. He was a servant of the Jewish people. He led them, but he worked tirelessly 7 days a week, 40 years straight. That's a long time. And even though the priesthood was taken away from him, he still was complete with God, complete with the Jewish people. He bared no resentment towards his brother Aaron for receiving the priesthood. And in this week's Torah portion, God comes and tells him how to make the garments. Moshe is the one who the priesthood was taken away from him, but he was the one who was preparing the garments and ordering how to prepare the garments and how the service should be done. He still did it with a complete heart. And that is how the Parashat, the Torah portion this week, plays out, with Moshe still being completely committed. Now, if anyone would ask you, this is a trivia 101 when it comes to basic Torah knowledge, it's important to know. How many Torah portions are there in our Torah? The answer would be 54. 54 parashiot. Bereshit, Noach, Lech Lecha, Vayera, all the way, you have 54 parashot. Just 2 more parashot than the weeks of the year. There's 52 weeks in a year. Add 2 more, and that is the amount of parashas you have. The first book, the book of Genesis, is a prelude to the development of the Jewish population, the Jewish nation. Starts with creation, develops all the way to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the tribes. Story pauses. Now the Jewish people are transforming into a real nation, from a family to a nation. The first book, the book of Genesis, has a total of 12 Torah portions. So that leaves us with 42. Within the 42, from the beginning of the book of Exodus till the end of the Torah, those 42 parashiot, without exception, Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioned in every single Torah portion, at least once, if not multiple times, except this week. This week, Parashat Tetzave, you can look high and low. You will not find the name of Moshe. That Mem, Shin, Hey, you're not finding it. Why? This is something strange. Ever since he was introduced to us as the biblical character that he was always mentioned. Even till the last parasha. Why in this Torah portion is he not there? There's multiple answers. We're going to go through a couple of them. And we're going to see some real solid concepts in understanding this relationship Moshe had with the Jewish people, Moshe had with God, and Moshe had with himself even. We're going to see some fascinating and amazing concepts. The first answer we're going to give is not from the Zera Shimshon, it's from our other sages, but I think it's a very noble answer, it's a great answer. Listen to the following. There's a tendency in life, we have this all in our own way, it's an imperfection, it's something that we try to refine as we get older and we mature, that whenever we hear of or we see something that someone came up with, we tend to disqualify it and say, I thought of that already, or that was my idea. Or I have a better question, or I heard a better answer, or I have a better one of those, or I've seen a better one of those. Whatever the case is, we always try to deflate whatever someone is experiencing in front of us, trying to get a little bit of that helium for ourselves. Unfortunately, it's not a beautiful trait. It's a very ugly trait. But again, in a certain way, we all do it in one way or another. What Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us is that this was the time for his brother Aaron to shine. It was his time to have the spotlight. What spotlight? The spotlight of being the great priest, the head priest, the Kohen Gadol. One would have thought Moshe could have said, even though he's the priest, I had that job, I gave it up. Or, it could have been mine, I forwent it, I let him take it. Or, trying to rein in on that spotlight, on that aha moment that Aharon was experiencing. No, Moshe deliberately chose, this answer, not all the answers go with this, but this answer is, Moshe deliberately chose to exclude himself out of this Torah portion for the fact that he wanted his brother to have his time to shine, his time of glory. And it's very applicable as a parent, as a coworker, as a neighbor. We sometimes have friends which do tell us ideas or concepts, or you're invited to someone else's bar mitzvah. It's not the time to show off your own son's skills. No, it's that bar mitzvah. You find yourself at a birthday party. You find yourself somewhere that they're honoring someone. It has nothing to do about you. When we go to a wedding, are we going for ourselves or are we going for the Chatan and Kala and their family? I'm not going to answer that because everyone has their own answer. Some people go with the true mitzvah in mind because they realize if I don't go and he doesn't go and she doesn't go, then no one's going to be there. So I'm part of the crowd and I'm part of giving that good feeling and that happiness to the bride and the groom. Others come, no, I'm going for myself. Who can I network with? Who can I see? What can I eat? What can I drink? And so on and so forth. It's the same place, it's the same action, but it's a completely different mindset. And in life, as a person matures, we realize we end up doing the same things, but it's all on the intention that we go through. Moshe had a pure intention. He said, this is the time for my brother Aaron to shine. I want to bow out of this Torah portion. But we can ask ourselves, why does he have to bow out of a Torah portion? Let his name be mentioned at least once. So, our sages tell us, later on for Moshe, when the Jewish people sinned with the sin of the golden calf, God summons Moshe back up to Shamayim, to the heavens, and he spends there 40 days and 40 nights, second time around, pleading to God to forgive the Jewish people for the unforgettable, yet a need of atonement, a need of forgiveness. the sin of the golden calf. And God tells Moshe, Moshe, these people are bad people, they're a stubborn people. I'm wiping them out. And Moshe says, absolutely not. He's speaking to God that way. God says, okay, you know what? I'll wipe them out, I'll keep you, I'll start a brand new nation from you. Sounds good. Moshe said, absolutely not. I'm committed to them. If you wipe them out, Moshe tells him, wipe my name out of your book, out of your Torah. V'im ayin, and if you don't forgive them, the Torah says, this is in chapter 32, verse 32, lev, right? V'im ayin, if you don't forgive them, meheni na misifrecha, erase me, Moshe tells God, from your book, from the Holy Torah. God says, psst, you're flexing, you're really committed? Let's give it a shot. I'll forgive them. Let's see where this goes. But Moshe was a very special man. Moshe's tongue held a lot of weight. Nevertheless, even though God forgave him, and even though Moshe's name appeared in the Torah multiple times, hundreds of times, but still Moshe said, erase me from your book. So now, Moshe's name had to be erased from one parasha. According to the answer we just gave, Moshe chose this parasha to be omitted from in order to let Aaron shine in his time of glory. There's other answers. Rabbeinu Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, he gives another answer. He says, if you take the words, Mecheni na misifrecha, erase me from your book, it could also be read as, Mecheni na misefer kaf. Erase me from your 20th book. What's your 20th book? Your 20th parasha. If you count from Bereshit, Parashat Tetzave is the 20th Torah portion of our Torah. And the content makes sense again. One opinion is Moshe deliberately wanted it, and the other opinion is that Moshe was punished for it. How was he punished? Listen to the first answer that Zera Shimshon gives. And I'm preparing us for the bomb answer that he gives, very deep and beautiful answer. That's his second answer. But listen to his first answer. His first answer is as follows. When Moshe was refusing to become the messenger to go and redeem the Jewish people out of Egypt, God was pushing him. And they were going back and forth, and they were going, as the Midrash says, 7 days of negotiations. Now I know when it comes to buying a house, sometimes you go a week or two or even a month negotiating, or hiring somebody. It takes time to negotiate. But negotiating with God for 7 days is not a simple task. It's something which is strenuous on the whole situation, if you can imagine. It's a chutzpah, it's a complete chutzpah, it's brazenness. But that was what Moshe needed, that's what the Jewish people needed as a leader. Yet, Moshe did overstep his bound a little bit. But the Zera Shimshon understands, what were they negotiating for 7 days for? What could you be going back for? Yes, I'm going. No, I'm going. Yes, you have to go. No, I'm not going. Back and forth. 7 days? How stubborn could Moshe be? Moshe had an intention. Moshe wanted God to be the one who redeems and delivers the Jewish people out of Egypt because Moshe wanted an eternal redemption. He wanted the Jewish people to be taken out directly by God. What's so special about being redeemed directly by God? Because then that would be everlasting. If God is the one who takes you out, you're always going to be out. If God's the one who frees you, you will always be free. That was his intention. Hashem says, I have other intentions. I specifically don't want to be the one who redeems the Jewish people. Because if I redeem them, it is an eternal redemption. And then if and when the Jewish people are going to sin or turn away from me, God cannot send them now back to exile. It was an eternal redemption. God would have to, God forbid, punish the Jewish people, destroy the Jewish people physically, opposed to destroying the temple or opposed to exiling them out of the land of Israel. And therefore, God comes and tells Moshe, I can't do it. It needs to be a mortal. It needs to be someone like you. It needs to be you who acts as a messenger to free the people. I mean, think of it. Does God really need a messenger? Does God need Moshe to be the one who goes and takes the Jewish people out? Absolutely not. He's almighty. He created the world. He created human beings. He can do anything. He specifically wanted a mortal to be the messenger in order that he could one day send the Jewish people back out to exile. Because the eternal redemption would have to be eternal. And this is what they were going back and forth with for 7 days. The Zera Shimshon says, since Moshe refused, and he was going back and forth with Hashem for so long, and in essence, he was punished that he was not going to be the priest, this Torah portion, the one where it speaks about the Kohen Gadol, is the specific Torah portion that Moshe was punished to not have his name in. So one interpretation is Moshe deliberately chose this Torah portion to be excluded from. The other interpretation is that Moshe was punished for refusing to being the messenger and therefore not becoming the Kohen Gadol, no longer having this position, and that's why I take it out of this week's Torah portion. This is all on a basic level. Okay, hope you're still with me, hope you didn't lose me. This is on a basic level. Now we're going to the Zera Shimshon is going to get very deep with us, but a fascinating concept which answers a lot of questions. The Talmud tells us that there were 3 things out of all of the thousands of laws and concepts that God taught Moshe Rabbeinu. Think of it, 613 commandments, and each of them has multiple derivatives which all come and stem from each one. So Moshe is taught all of this by God. There are only 3 things Moshe requested God to help him understand or to show him. Everything else he understood. There were 3 things he didn't. Talmud tells us. One of them being, Moshe didn't understand when the time to do the blessing on the moon is. We know every month we have Birkat HaLevana, the blessing on the moon. And Moshe Rabbeinu, when God commands him, HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim, HaChodesh hazeh, zeh, Rashi and the Talmud explain, Hashem took Moshe Rabbeinu out and he pointed to the moon and he said, this is how, and this is when you bless the moon. The second was, when it came to casting the golden menorah, we read in last week's Torah portion that Moshe Rabbeinu had it shown to him. It was reiterated over that it was shown to him. The commentaries say that the superfluous terminology is telling us that God actually showed Moshe a menorah at a fire. He showed him a vision of a menorah at a fire in order to clarify to him how to cast this golden menorah, because he didn't know otherwise. The third was the concept of machatzit hashekel. Later on, when God wants to have Moshe count all the Jewish people, he says, let's count them all with half a shekel. Moshe didn't understand what that means, half a shekel. So God showed him, again, an image of fire, a half shekel. These are the 3 things the Talmud says Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand. Out of everything, these were the only ones. The Zera Shimshon finds a beautiful connection. He says, if we go to the last verse of last week's Parashat, it says, V'choditot ha-mishkan nechoshet. All of the pegs of the courtyard of the Mishkan that held up the beams were all made out of copper. Nechoshet, the Zera Shimshon says, is an acronym for these 3 things that he didn't know. Nun for ner, the menorah. Chet for chodesh, for the moon. Shin for shekel, the half shekel. What's the taf? Taf, the Zera Shimshon says, is tir'eh, you will see. Meaning, God had to show those 3 mitzvot, those commandments, to Moshe. And then what? How does that connect to this week's Torah portion? Ve'ata Tetzave. And now God is coming and commanding Moshe. The Zera Shimshon says, every other time in the Torah, you know how God refers to when He speaks to Moshe? Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. And God speaks to Moses saying, why is this time Ve'ata Tetzaveh? Specifically, God was hinting to Moshe Rabbeinu that the same way your name is absent right over here, you will unfortunately be absent when it comes to entering the land of Israel. You won't be there. Now God already started hinting this to him. How did he hint this to him? He hinted it to him with those 3 mitzvot that he didn't understand. Now listen closely. This is genius, this concept that the Zera Shimshon sends. He says, 1 second. Moshe's a genius. He had the best teacher the world ever saw. He was the creator himself. And you're telling me he doesn't know how to do the blessing on the moon? He doesn't know how to make a golden menorah? I mean, there were much more difficult concepts to wrap one's head around. Civil law, judicial law, circumcision, deep concepts in Torah. I mean, there's so much that there is to understand that would be harder than how to make a menorah, how to make a half a shekel. I mean, come on. Making a blessing on the moon? Are those things that Moshe couldn't understand? He needed God's divine intervention to help him and show him how to fulfill those mitzvot? The Zera Shimshon says that would be very primitive to think that Moshe just didn't understand the basics. I mean, the Mishkan, last week's Torah portion, we have multiple dimensions and multiple pieces of furniture with intricate detail. And Moshe understood all that. The only one he didn't understand was the menorah. Frankly, when you look at the Torah portion, the menorah is probably the easiest one to understand. But Moshe didn't. So the Zera Shimshon says no. These 3 mitzvot, he understood what it means when to make the blessing, or how to cast the menorah, or what a half shekel looked like. But the underlying concept of each of these mitzvot didn't resonate with Moshe, with the vision of the plan that God had for him and the Jewish people. What was the vision God presented to Moshe? Is take them out of Egypt, receive the Torah, and escort them into the land of Israel, build the temple, and that is home run. That's the end goal. So in Moshe's mind, his idea was, I'm taking the Jewish people into the land of Israel. Yet God hinted to Moshe 3 times, the same way like he hinted to him by just not telling him right away he's not going to enter the land of Israel. It's just V'ata Tetzave, anonymously. Your name's missing. You'll be missing in that picture. Moshe was hinted to by God 3 times already that he will not enter the land of Israel through these 3 mitzvot. Let's start one by one as the Zera Shimshon does. He says the first is the mitzvah of Birkat HaLevana, blessing the moon. The Jewish people are likened to, they resemble a moon. Why? Well, if you pay attention, the moon has its ups and its downs. It increases in size for the first 15 days and it decreases and shrinks over the next 15 days. The Jewish people, we're going to speak about that. The Jewish people are the same way. We have our ups and our downs. When we're following in the way of the Torah and the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're on an increase, we're on an incline. And the opposite, unfortunately, we're on a decline. Just like a moon, it has its growth and it's shrinking. It's expanding and it's contracting. That's a moon. A moon is also likened to the Jewish people in the fact that the moon has no light source in and of itself. All it does is it reflects the light of the sun. God, being the sun, reflects down His wisdom, His blessing, His life, His light on us, and we are only a product of the light and the blessing that God shines down on us. So the Jewish people are likened to the moon. The moon is also an aspect of malchut, of kingship, of reign. We know that when God created the world, He created it with 2 light sources, the sun and the moon, and they're both equal in size. And the moon came and complained to God, how could there be 2 captains to the same ship? Good idea, 2 captains to the same ship. We're going to shrink you, and you're not going to have your own light. You're only going to reflect light. But God still appeased the moon, because imagine being as big as the sun and then shrunk to as small as the moon is and losing its light power. God says, don't worry, the Jewish people will bless you every 30 days. You know how often the sun's blessed? Only once every 28 years.
Yeah.
So there is a discrepancy between the two over there. Nevertheless, the Zera Shimshon says, Eretz Yisrael is also compared to, or likened to, a moon in the concept of expanding and contracting. Eretz Yisrael is also referred to as in our Nevi'im as Eretz HaTzevi, the land of the deer. Really? The land of the deer? I can name you 100 animals that live and find their habitat in the land of Israel. It's the land of the deer? No, the Talmud explains that if one were to skin a deer, the skin, which fit perfectly around its body prior to skinning it, is impossible to have it wrapped around the body again and to, so to say, reskin the deer, because the hide actually contracts. It expanded when it was around around the deer, and it contracted when it's off. The Talmud tells us, the Zera Shimshon explains, the land of Israel is the same way. When there's a lot of Jews in the land of Israel, the land magically expands and there's room for everybody. I mean, anyone been to Jerusalem lately, or Tveria lately, or anywhere for that matter? People are living on top of each other. They're finding there's a way, there's these new communities building up and sprouting out in all aspects, even of the desert in Israel. This is Eretz HaTzevi. When there's a lot of Jews there, it expands. When there's less Jews, it contracts. All this to say...
The first stamp of Israel was Tzvi.
Very nice. The first mailing stamp. Yes, because it's called Eretz HaTzevi, and now you know why.
Right.
It expands and it contracts as needed be for the Jewish people. The first 15 days of the month, when the moon is expanding and it's growing, actually corresponds to the 15 generations between Abraham and King Solomon. Those were growing generations. Those were great generations. The next 15 days of when it contracts and it shrinks corresponds to the 15 generations of kings between Rechavam and Tzidkiyahu, all the way to Tzidkiyahu. Those 15 generations, which were unfortunately not the best of years for the Jewish people. They were on a decline. With this, the Zera Shimshon says, Moshe could not wrap his head around the concept of blessing a moon. A moon is something which expands and shrinks, yet as bad as it gets, there's always a concept of rejuvenation. There's always a new month. There's, even after the decline, there's always going to be an incline. Whenever the ball hits the floor, it always bounces back up. But Moshe didn't understand that. He says, if I am taking the Jewish people into the land of Israel and building the temple, there's no need for the mitzvah of blessing the moon. Meaning, there's no need for this concept of renewal, because the Jewish people are no longer a roller coaster people. They're no longer people which are likened to the moon, which have ups and downs. It's just up, 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 and up. That was his intention. That was the intention God portrayed to Moshe. But God then was hinting to him, no, you have to have the blessing of the moon, because you are not going to be the one who takes the Jewish people into the land of Israel. They're still going to need this concept of rejuvenation after shrinking, unfortunately, whenever they do, and have that opportunity every month to bless the moon. That's the moon. Let's move on to the second one. The second one is the menorah. The menorah was very interesting, because when God in last week's Torah portion, Parashat Terumah, commands Moshe to cast the menorah, very specific, with these buttons and these flowers and these ornaments, very specific, something which he should understand, with cups, very good. Yet, the Torah doesn't say ta'aseh et ha-menorah, it says te'aseh. There's an extra yud, taf, yud, ayin, sin, hey. Why is there an extra yud? Zera Shimshon brings the Siftei Kohen, a previous Italian Chacham to him, who quotes the Midrash. The Midrash says that Yud corresponds to, obviously, the number 10. To the fact that there were to be 10 menorahs lit. So Moshe was thinking, why is God only commanding me to light one menorah of 7 branches? That extra Yud in the Torah alludes to the lighting of 10 7-branch menorahs. Now, what does 10 7-branch menorahs correspond to? The 70 nations of the world. That as the leading chosen people, the Jewish people, we would light and illuminate, or lagoim, illuminate the world, illuminate the 70 nations, rule over the 70 nations in a positive way by lighting 70 candles. But Moshe didn't understand. This is what he wasn't bothered with how to make one. He was bothered with, why is he only commanding me to make one of 7 branches? Until God shows him a fiery image of one menorah with only 7 branches, not times 10. And Moshe couldn't understand why. But God was hinting to him that his work was only to light one menorah of 7 branches and not times 10 to have 70. That was, as the Zera Shimshon says, reserved for King Solomon. King Solomon built the temple. King Solomon lit 10 menorahs of 7 branches each. 10 golden menorahs. He was the one who was going to light on behalf of the 70 nations because he was the one who builds the temple. But Moshe couldn't understand. It should be him. God's telling him, it's not you. You're not. He's hinting to him, you're not entering the land of Israel. It's not going to be you. So all you need to do is light for 7. Why 7? Because the Jewish people, you're lighting now in the merit of the 7 nations which are inhabiting the land of Canaan right now. So that the Jewish people can successfully overcome them, you're lighting 7 lights now to overcome them. No need for 70. And the final, Machatzit HaShekel, listen to how the Zera Shimshon says this was a hint to Moshe that he was not entering the land of Israel. If you take the word shekel, if you take the gematria of the word shekel, how do we have? We have shin, which would be 300. Kuf is another 100. That would be 430. Okay? There is another method of calculating gematria. It's called, I'll say the Hebrew and then I'll explain it. It's called atbash method. What does atbash mean? That means you're going to take aleph and give aleph not the numerical value of 1, rather the numerical value of taf, 400. And bet, you're not going to give it a numerical value of 2, you're rather going to give it a numerical value of shin, 300. And gimel, instead of 3, you're going to make it 200. If you take the word shekel and you do the numerical value in the atbash method, meaning the swap the number first to first, second to last to second to last, we're going to now not be left with 430. Rather, the shin is going to become a bet, 2. The kuf is going to be a vav, that's 4, a dalet. And the lamed is going to be a chaf, which is 20. So 20 and 4 and 2 is 26. 26 is the name of God. So shekel has a numerical value of 430, but it also has a numerical value of 26, the name of God. When God comes and tells Moshe Rabbeinu to bring half a shekel, Moshe is thinking, half a shekel, that's only half God's name. That makes no sense. Why should we bring a half of God's name? If I, Moshe Rabbeinu, am bringing the Jewish people into the land of Israel, God's name should be complete once and for all. But no, Hashem was hinting to him, no, bring half a shekel. My name is incomplete. It's going to be incomplete, unfortunately, for a while. You're not going to be bringing the Jewish people into the land of Israel. You're not going to be building the temple. It will only be complete by the time of the Mashiach. So these 3 methods, it wasn't he didn't understand how to make the blessing, or how to make the menorah, or how to make half a shekel. It's that the concepts, the underlying concepts for each and every one of them, contradicted Moshe Rabbeinu's depiction of the plan God was showing him and God was telling him. He didn't get the hints. God was hinting to him, it's not going to be you. You're not going to be the one entering the land of Israel. Now why, the Zera Shimshon explains, why did God hint him in 3 different ways? Just tell it to him straight out. There were 3 things Moshe Rabbeinu did wrong. These were the causes of him not entering the land of Israel. Striking the rock actually was not the reason why I didn't enter the land of Israel. That is the way the Zera Shimshon explains what sealed the decree that his prayers now cannot overturn the decree. Now listen to the following. The first was when he refuses to become the messenger. When he refuses to become the messenger on behalf of the Jewish people, as we said, when he says, what was the terminology? When he says, Shlachna biyad tishlach. He says, find someone else. Find someone who is more worthy than me. Oh, really? Find someone that's more worthy than you? I'm going to take away the rulership from you. You will not be the one who brings the Jewish people in. It's likened to the moon. The moon has an aspect of rulership to it. So that was the first hint. The second was when, unfortunately, the Jewish people came back complaining to Moshe Rabbeinu after he spoke to Paro. Him and Aaron come and speak to Paro. Paro now makes the workload more and does not supply bricks. They came complaining to him. You know what Moshe did? He just turned right to God and he said, Lama hareota la'am hazeh. How come did you make it worse for them? Ever since I went to Paro, Moshe said, it only became worse for the Jewish people. You're complaining to God? That was the reason for his second hint. The hint of the menorah. Everything I do is just an illumination. Everything I do is for the good. The third mistake the Zera Shimshon explains Moshe Rabbeinu did was that unfortunately he allowed the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, the Egyptians, the Gentile Egyptians who wanted to come along, he let them come along during the Exodus. And by the way, they were the ones who caused all the trouble and all the no good. They're the ones who, when they came to the sea, some of them ran back and told Paro. That's why Paro chased them. They were the ones that started the complaining. They were the ones who brought on the golden calf. Can you think of it? Why would a Jew ever think of creating a golden calf? That makes absolutely no sense. It wasn't them. It was Erev Rav. It was the Gentile Egyptians, the mixed multitude that came along. They came along and said, look, your leader and your God are a no-show. They said 40 days, they're not here. They miscalculated by a couple hours. And they said, come on, we need a God, we need a leader. Let's get our gold together. Aaron, you're the priest. You're going to bring it up. You're going to do the whole thing. They were the ones who caused all the problems. Moshe, unfortunately, was the one who allowed them to come along. That was his third mistake. That was the hint of machatzit hashekel. All of those donations and horrible ideas, unfortunately, that came from the Erev Rav. The striking of the stone is what, until the striking of the stone, if Moshe could have prayed and prayed and prayed and overthrown that decree. Because that's why there were only hints. But once he struck the stone, then God said, it's over, it's done. I sent you 3 hints, you didn't get it, I gave you some time, now, unfortunately, you're not able to enter the land of Israel. Very stringent judgment on Moshe. As a high level, the higher a person is, the more expectation, the more responsibility a person has, the stronger and more scrutinized they are, especially when it comes to God, to Moshe Rabbeinu. And unfortunately, he was not allowed to enter in. So to wrap it up, why is Moshe Rabbeinu's name missing in this week's Torah portion? So we gave the answer of Rabbi Chacham Ovadia Yosef that it's the 20th, Misefer Kaf. Erase me from the 20th Torah portion. We gave the answer of the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe deliberately decided to stay out of this portion because he wanted Aaron to shine in his time of glory. We learned the first answer of the Zera Shimshon, that Moshe was punished for not accepting the position of being a messenger. A leader, but more of a messenger. You don't want to be a messenger? Okay, we're taking you out of being a Kohen. This is speaking about Kohanim, that's why you're not here. And this third answer is connecting to the end of last week's Parashat. Nechoshet, copper, nun, corresponding to the menorah, and then the chet for the blessing of the moon, the shin, the shekel. Tireh, Hashem had to show him. Why did he have to show it to him? It was a hint to one, to you being anonymous, to you unfortunately not being part of the picture when it comes to entering the land of Israel. It's sometimes God sends us signs, He sends us hints, and we don't pick up on it. And the best that we can hope for is picking up on them at least after the fact. When we're able to look back at our lives and say, God warned me for this. He sent someone to help me with this. He put me down a certain path, and it was all for the good. Yet we need to take those hints as much as possible as we're able to understand them and act upon them. Repent, atone, and do the right things. One more thing I wanted to mention was, it's funny to note, Moshe happened to be missing from only one Torah portion, and Aaron was also missing only one Torah portion. Which Torah portion was that? That was last week's Torah portion. Last week was the only portion that Aaron was left out of, and this week was the one that Moshe Rabbeinu was left out of. Again, their humility and their perfect companionship. One of the greatest blessings a person can bless their children, or could even bless brothers, is for them to have a relationship of Moshe and Aaron. Moshe was so happy for Aaron. Aaron was so happy for Moshe. They each were happy and content with their position, the lot that they had. Even though we bless our children to be like Ephraim and Menashe, the Mefarshim explain the reason why we do that is because Ephraim and Menashe were the first two brothers to grow up in harmony and to grow up in exile. Remember when Yaakov switches his hands, not one of them went peep or no, make a mistake. They just went along with it. They lived in harmony. This is what Joseph and how Joseph raised them. So we bless our kids to live in harmony and to live the same way as Menashe and Ephraim, who were the first children to be brought up out of the house of Jacob, out in exile. Yet, the greatest relationship of brothers we see in our Torah is the relationship between Moshe and Aaron. We don't see that they snap at each other. We see only good things. The only minor flaw we find is Aaron listening to Miriam when Miriam speaks in some very, very, very slim manner, something derogatory about Moshe. But he never said that he accepted it. He never said that he agreed with it. So we only see peace and harmony and love between the two of them. So may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless us in the merit of the Zera Shimshon, that we should always have peace and harmony with our family, our friends, our brothers, our sisters, and all Am Yisrael. Amen.